illustrate the given data, we have made a survey amongst the participants of the Bulgarian families. And we have made a circular diagram with each and every expense that the normal family has and the percentage it takes on the diagram. We will now start with food because it takes the largest portion of the family's budget. If you look at the diagram on the right, you will notice that our family statistic data is right in between the official data and the recommended values. And therefore, one might think that our families are from a middle class, but we know that that is not correct. But because if you look at the graph on the right, you will notice that there are families who give almost 55% of their family budget for food. So to better understand the given data, we have constructed a standard deviation line which shows the recommended values for each and every consumption. And if you look at the graph on the right, you will notice that only 3 families are, as we can say, middle class, and the rest are either below or above it. And the ones with the families which have red dots represent families who are less wealthy. That's good, you can go. So the families with red dots represent families who do not have large budgets, and the one with green dots shows families who are wealthier. Next slide, please. If we look at the graph on the right for electricity, left, you will notice that there is not much deviation from the standard deviation line, and therefore you might think that there's nothing wrong. But if you look at the graph on the right, you will notice that there is quite a lot of difference between the data we have collected and the recommended values. And that is because electricity is not quite cheap in Bulgaria. And some of you might say that we should invest in renewable sources of energy, but that is also not an option and adequate because renewable sources of energy are quite expensive and actually more expensive than the fossil fuels we use in Bulgaria, so that would be inadequate. Next slide, please. Now we continue with clothing, and experts recommend that in crisis times, clothing is one of the best things. Buying less clothes is one of the best things that you can do in crisis situations so you can save more money. And actually, they also say that in these situations in crisis, you should buy only the clothes that you need and wear out your older clothes. And if you look at the graph on the right, you'll see that Bulgarians do the opposite and buy actually quite a lot of clothes, and even in these crisis situations. Next slide, please. Residents. Here, if you look at the graph on the left, you will notice that there are a lot of families who are below the standard deviation line, and that is because of a Bulgarian tradition. And this Bulgarian tradition is that most Bulgarians have their own homes, and not a lot of Bulgarians rent out homes. That's because they like to have a roof on their head, as some like to say. But there are also families who rent out homes, and these are the families with the red dots, which are above the standard deviation line. And also, if you look at the graph on the right, you'll see that the recommended values are quite higher than the family statistic, than the analysis, than the data that we have collected. Next slide, please. Healthcare. Here, experts suggest that it's better to give a certain amount of money on disease prevention than to spend a bigger amount of money on disease treatment. And as you might have thought, Bulgarians do exactly the opposite and wait until they get sick, and then they spend a lot of money on treatment and doctors, and yeah, you get the point.
Yeah.
Next slide, please. Transport. Well, here there's actually not much we can say except that the amount of money given for transport depends on the distance between the family and their workplace, school, kindergarten, and so on and so on. Next slide, please. education. Here, I have to tell you another Bulgarian tradition, and that's that Bulgarians support their children morally and financially with their education, and therefore you will see that at the graph on the right has quite high values, and that is good. But if you look at the graph on the left, you will also notice that there are quite a lot of families who spend well above 15% on their budget on education, and that's because they have students who live and study in different states and different countries. You will also notice that the majority of families spend less than 7.5% of their budget on education, and that does not translate to poor education. It's just because schools in Bulgaria and education in general is not quite expensive, and that's why there are so few monies given for education. If I take you back to the graph on the right, you will notice that our statistic data is not in correlation with the official values and the recommended values, and that's because the students in our school are from a language school, and we need books who are specificated for our language needs, and therefore we spend more money on education than the rest of the kids. Next slide, please. Credits. Here, you might be shocked by the data given because there are almost 90% of the families don't have from little to no credits, and that's because Bulgarians in general don't like to take credits or loans. I don't know what that is, but it's like that. And there are also families who spend above 20% on credits and loans, and that's because they have taken credits to either support their children who need to study or have taken credits so that they can pay for their homes. Next slide, please. Here, I must tell you that people in general in Bulgaria like to leave some money for a rainy day. And that does not concern only the not so wealthy, it concerns also the richer people, because rich people would prefer to save some money than to invest it in in something that they are not quite sure of. And next slide, please. And last but not least, entertainment. Here, experts say that entertainment is the last thing that you should try to cut corners on, because it is the one thing that recharges your battery, gives you the moral and, well, physical strength to continue to do your job, to get money, and so on and so on.